Hey everyone, LVD here, and today I'll be bringing you something a little different. Instead of a gameplay, I'll be bringing you a deck. And the deck I'm featuring today is the Demon Fodder deck. It's my take on the Shadowborn Apostle deck. And as you can see, we're not playing any Shadowborn demons in our version. Instead, I opted to just play two Gristlebrands, which are more powerful than the Shadowborn demon. Now I'll be giving you some explanations to why I'm only running 30 Shadowborn Apostles instead of, say, 300. And the reason for that is we aren't simply playing Shadowborn Apostles and Demons, we're also playing a couple cards that synergize very well with the cards we're playing. And the most important of those cards is Blood Artist. If you can get a Blood Artist in play before sacrificing your 6 Shadowborn Apostles, you can have a 12 life swing, you gain 6, your opponent loses 6. And if you have multiple Blood Artists, then you can almost win the game on the spot. And that's why we're only playing 30 Shadowborn Apostles instead of some other ridiculous amount, because besides practical reasons, we want to increase the odds of drawing a Blood Artist because we really want to have one in play. And to further smooth out our deck a bit, we have 4 Sign-in Bloods in our deck. We're only running 18 lands, as you can see, so having some card draw isn't bad. It only costs 2 black mana, so that's not a problem. The life also is pretty marginal. And the card draw is really nice when we don't have all our Shadowborn Apostles we want, or perhaps we need more land to cast a Immortal Servitude for 4. And that's the card I'm going to discuss now. Immortal Servitude, only running 2 copies, but it's a very powerful card. Basically what we want to do is, after we've sacrificed our Shadowborn Apostles, say our opponent kills our Gristlebrand and we have to rebuild, then we can simply cast Immortal Servitude, where X is 1, and get all our Shadowborn Apostles back into play. And then we can sacrifice them again to get our second Gristlebrand if we still have it in our library. Or we can just sacrifice them to trigger our Blood Artists. It does come up where you Immortal Servitude for 2 to get your Blood Artists back into play, but it's not as common as doing it for 1. So the reason we're only running 2, even though the effect is very powerful, is because, again, we want to increase the consistency of the deck. As you can see, we have 30 Shadowborn Apostles, so 1 in 2 cards is a Shadowborn Apostle. That means that on average, we are going to have 6 Shadowborn Apostles in play on turn 4 or 5, which is a pretty good average. So that's also the reason why we only have 2 Gristlebrands. We really don't want to draw our Gristlebrands, because we basically only want Shadowborn Apostles, a couple Swamps, and Blood Artists. So if we were running 4 Gristlebrands, our odds of drawing one when we don't want it are pretty high. The reason why we're running 2 instead of 1 is obviously if we draw our Gristlebrand, we can't search it up. So it could come up that you draw both and then you don't have a target to search for. But you could still win with Blood Artists, even though it's gonna be a lot harder. And now I'm gonna discuss Gristlebrand. It's a very powerful card, and the reason for that is, even if you don't get to attack with it, you can always use the ability, even if it's about to die. And if you have enough life that allows you to basically rebuild, for example, you could draw an Immortal Servitude, get all your Apostles back, and make another Gristlebrand the following turn. Or you can just draw into more Swamps, Sign-in Bloods, and Blood Artists, which is also pretty decent. Now I'll be showing you some cards that didn't make the deck. I already discussed the Shadowborn Demon. It could still be a sideboard card, since I'm not featuring a sideboard today. The Enter the Battlefield ability of Shadowborn Demon is very powerful, and the funny thing is it can't target other demons, so if our opponent is playing the same deck as we are, they can't kill our Gristlebrand. The upkeep cost of Shadowborn Demon isn't really a problem, since of course there's the synergy with Shadowborn Apostle, and it could come up that you have a Blood Artist in play and you need a sacrifice outlet, and Shadowborn Demon could be that sacrifice outlet if you really need it to be. Another card we could put in the sideboard is Sire of Insanity. It's a great card against control decks, since you can on turn 4 or 5 basically let them discard their hand, and they can't counter the Sire since you're using the Shadowborn Apostle ability. We could be running some black-red dual lands to be able to cast Sire of Insanity, but again, that's the reason why I didn't feature a sideboard yet, because I like the main deck the way it is, and I didn't want to dilute it by adding red mana sources that may or may not come into play tapped. And in the next slide, I'm gonna discuss some cards that are problem cards for the deck, that are more or less often played in Standard. Probably the most annoying card is a Static Caster, since it can lock down all our Shadowborn Apostles, and can also kill our Blood Artists. The same with Curse of Deathhold, even though it's a lot slower than Static Caster, since it's only in play on turn 5, and perhaps you can have a Gristlebrand in play before that. The Tension Sphere is also a problem, but you can play around it by not playing out all your Apostles at once, and perhaps playing most of them and sacrificing them in the same turn. And then Golgari Charm is mostly used for its Destroy Enchantment ability, but the -1/-1 is also an option, so that can also be a problem if they run it out on turn 2 or 3 when you're still building up your Apostles. Now I'll be showing you a replay of a game I played with the deck, with the player on top of your screen, and we are up against a Junk Reanimator deck. The footage is sped up a little to save you the boring parts, because the gameplay was pretty long. And as you can see, we had a pretty quick start with 3 Apostles in play on turn 2, and that's also the reason why we're playing so few lands, because we can basically win the game with 2 or 3 lands. And our opponent casts a Lifebane Zombie on turn 3, which doesn't hit anything because we aren't playing green or white cards. Now it's our turn, and we have to decide if we want to drop our Blood Artist or drop more Shadowborn Apostles, and looks like we decided to play more Apostles. Maybe we wanted to keep hidden that we're playing the Blood Artists, and we didn't block, of course, because we don't want to lose any Apostles if possible. And there we drew another Blood Artist, and now we have to decide if we perhaps want to play both artists before sacrificing all the Apostles, or not being greedy and just sacrificing the Apostles right away, since we do have 6. But we opted to play a Blood Artist first. Meanwhile, our opponent dropped a Restoration Angel and attacked us for 6 points. So now we're at 11, and our opponent is clearly out of range after deploying a Centaur Healer. So now we have to decide again if we want to play another artist before sacrificing, and in this case we did, but in hindsight I think that was a mistake, as you'll see soon, because here our opponent attacks for 9 points of damage, and although we don't really want to block, I was afraid of an Obzedat, which could do 2 additional damage and kill us on the spot. So I wasn't really familiar with our opponent's list, so I didn't know if he had any Obzedats, but I wanted to be safe, and so that's why I blocked there with the Blood Artist. and our opponent tries to keep us off our second land, but luckily we draw another one right away. And now it's time to deploy our 6th apostle and sacrifice it, although I could have waited until my opponent's turn and perhaps blocked with the apostles and then sacrifice them. So now we have a Gristlebrand in play, but we're a bit on the back foot, because if our opponent has a way to remove our Gristlebrand, then we're in trouble. But it looks like our opponent doesn't have anything and just attacks with the slime and follows it up with a Thragtusk, going up to 12 life. And now we have a decision. Do we attack and guarantee gaining 7 life, or do we stay back and hope to block something? And I opted to attack here, because otherwise our opponent could simply attack with the acidic slime and not let us gain any life, basically, because we don't really want to make that trade. And we deployed another Blood Artist. We do have an Immortal Servitude in hand, but currently only 2 swamps in play. So we want to get that number up to 4 so we can cast it for axis 1. Here again we have to chum block with a Blood Artist to stay out of range of a possible Obsidian which we're playing around. And meanwhile our opponent cast a Restoration Angel for full value, getting 5 life and a beast. So our opponent has 7 creatures on the board currently and we only have 2. But luckily for us, one of those creatures is a Gristlebrand. So again, we decide to attack instead of stay back on defense to guarantee gaining 7 life. And also a Blood Artist trigger, which brings us all the way up to 17 life. And now our opponent is on 7. And as you'll see, that won't stay the same for long, since our opponent is going to cast a Burial Rites. After combat, we decide to chum block again to stay out of range, and we're currently on 4 life, so our opponent casts an Burial Rites, gets back Restoration Angel for full value again, and is now on a safe 11 life. It's our turn, and again we have to decide if we want to attack or not. And again we decide it's best to attack here, even though that's going to put us on 1 life after chum blocking, as you'll see soon. Our opponent also thinking if he wants to block, and he does, because we could possibly have some, I don't know, Sign in Bloods to target our opponent, because he did see 1 Sign in Blood earlier when he cast his Lifebane Zombie. And now we decide to activate our Gristlebrand's ability to draw 7 cards. And now we have enough mana to cast our Immortal Servitude and get back 6 Shadowborn Apostles. As you'll see soon, they will all be on chum block duty, because otherwise we would be dead, because our opponent has a flying creature in play, so any other creature would be lethal. There we go. Luckily 1 Shadowborn Apostle can trade for the Lifebane Zombie, which will no longer be a problem for us. There we go. And now our opponent casts another Burial Rites for Restoration Angel, 3rd time for full value on a Thragtusk. But we're still in the battle. Here I was a little desperate. I didn't think we could do anything, but I decided to give it a shot. So I attacked once more with the Gristlebrand, and luckily I had another Immortal Servitude in hand, but still no Blood Artist in play, which is starting to become a problem. This time around we do get 7 apostles instead of 6 because we discarded one earlier, or yeah. And another Grizzly Salvage from our opponent, revealing Disciple of Bolas, which is a nice combo with high-powered creatures like Thragtusk, because otherwise the junk deck doesn't have any real card draw. Our opponent attacks with everything. We chump, and activate the ability of the Shadowborn Apostles to get a second Griselbrand and sacrifice the first one. Because of the new legend rule, you can keep one, the one you want. We didn't block with the Griselbrand because we would lose more life if we didn't chum block with the Apostles. Meanwhile, our opponent cast a Disciple, sacrificing his Thragtusk and drawing 5 cards and gaining 5 life. But we're still in it, and now it's time to deploy some more Shadowborn Apostles after attacking again. And I also dropped a Blood Artist together with the Shadowborn Apostles, so now we can start doing some damage and gaining some life. Our opponent deep in the tank because he does have a Shadowborn demon, but he can't kill our Griselbrand with it, which is pretty amusing considering there aren't that many demons in Standard. So he eventually cast a Gyre Sage and followed up with another Thragtusk. And he sends in with everyone. We block and gain some life in the process, since we don't really have another demon in our library that we would like to search up. So our Shadowborn Apostles are basically just triggering the Blood Artist to deal damage and gain life. Luckily our opponent doesn't have any removal for either Griselbrand or Blood Artist, otherwise we wouldn't be in this anymore. Our opponent chum blocking with the Angel, and now it's time for the grand finale, because our Blood Artist triggers and our opponent goes down to 4. We do have a Signing Blood in hand, which represents 2 damage to our opponent. So all we need to do is activate our Griselbrand a couple times until we draw a Signing Blood, which we do right away, and target our opponent for 4 damage and win the game. Our opponent managed to equalize game 2, but we did manage to win game 3 to win the match. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more deck decks in the future. And as always, take care.